Guys, can I ask you a favor? Ask you to pray for me, and I'll pray for you. Let us pray. Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. I ask for wisdom, courage, confidence, and calmness in my task on this day. I ask that every word that I speak be used to glorify your holy name. And Father, I ask, as your son said in Matthew 6, 25, 33 and 34, don't worry about your life. Don't worry about what you drink, what you eat, what you wear. But seek my Father's kingdom and all his righteousness. And all these things will be provided for you. Father, give every single man the strength to live in that moment with Jesus. Your son saw. We saw you, Father, in everything and everywhere. Help us to live our life in that way. In your son's name, we pray you say, amen. Amen. I'd like to speak for a short period of time on your legacy. And I'd like to start out with a question. What's your legacy? What legacy are you living and leaving right now? You know, I know this guy who was 62 years old. And he decided he wanted to show his gratitude to his 7th grade coach for transforming his life at age 12. So he searched for that coach for 10 long years. And when he found him, he drove 8 long hours straight to his house just to shake his hand and say thank you for transforming my life. That's the importance of living and leaving a positive legacy. I am fascinated by people who do that. Webster defined legacy as money or material possessions left over to someone by will or bequest. I have studied this paradigm for a number of years, and I have come to the conclusion that your legacies will never be about money or material possessions. Well, Jesus also left the definition of legacy. And it comes from John chapter 15, verse 15 through 17. And Jesus said, I no longer call you servants, because the servant does not know his master's business. I call you my friends, because everything that I have learned from my Father, I have made known to you. You did not choose me, but I chose you. And I'll point you to go out and bear fruit that would last. Now, when Jesus says bear fruit, he's talking about your character. Do you know you paint a picture every single day of who you are? By what you do and the things you say when you interact with other people? But the greatest portrait of your character are the things that you say and do when you don't think anyone is watching you. Your character is about, your legacies is about those ways you love and serve other people. When Jesus said, I point you to go out and bear fruit, he's talking about those wonderful things that you want people to say and remember about you. Those wonderful actions and deeds that you would like for people to emulate. That's your legacy. You know, John Maxwell in his book, Leadership 101, he says we talk about all these character development things, leadership and all these character development and these traits of leadership, but we never talk about legacies. That's the one we know the least about. He says achievement is when you do great things on your own. He says success comes when you empower people to do great things with you. Significance comes when you empower people to do great things for you. But your legacy comes when you empower people to do great things without you. Without you. You know, people who decide to live and leave a positive legacy think differently than other people. They have this unique mental attitude about them that comes from an internalized discovery of self. And I call this internalized discovery a strong, positive, confident concept called self-awareness. This self-awareness was drawn out of me at a very early age by two of the greatest mentors, the greatest character developers, the greatest teachers, in my opinion, that has ever walked the face of this earth. And I would like to share with you how they did that. I grew up in poverty. I'm the middle child of 8 siblings. I had a younger brother. Pete died 2 weeks after birth. There would have been 9 of us. My father, that service station deal that Goose showed you guys, my father worked at a full-service humble station on Main Street in that small town I grew up in. He did pump gas, he fixed flats, he washed cars for the majority of his life. My mom, she worked as a domestic. She cleaned other folks' house the majority, all her life. If you ever saw the movie The Help, that's what my mom did. The 10 of us, including my mother and my father, lived in a 3-room house that sit on cinder blocks. There was no indoor bathroom facility and no hot water. When we got ready to take a hot bath, we would heat the water up on the stove and we poured it into a number 5 foot tub. Anybody see a number 5 foot tub in that picture? You see my sister is hanging under her head. That's not a lot of room, is it? The majority of the clothes that we wore came from those homes that my mother cleaned. Coming out of church, I got on my Sunday best. If Gucci had a way to blow that picture up so you could see it, you would see the holes in the knees of those jeans. If I turned around, you would see the holes in the elbows of that shirt. On a good day, my mom put those iron-on patches on them. I remember my older brother, Rayfield, and I used to cut cardboard out to put it in the soles of our shoes to keep the heat of the pavement out in the summer, the water out when it rained, the cold out in the winter. I remember in elementary school, going to elementary school, and my mom lining us up every single day, and she would give us dry meat and bread bologna sandwiches and 2 cents for a carton of milk. Now, we have all ate bologna sandwiches, haven't we? Do you know the problem with those bologna sandwiches? I had to carry it in that greasy paper bag because we didn't have the money to go to the store to get another bag. Getting another bag costs money. So every day, I went to school with those holes in my clothes, those holes in my shoes, carrying that greasy bologna sandwich in that brown paper sack. Now, walking around in school with holes in your clothes, holes in your shoes, carrying that bologna sandwich left me with, some people say low self-esteem. I had no self-esteem. And it reflected in my grades. Every single report card that I got in elementary school was filled with C's, D's, and F's, more D's and F's than anything else. I remember the last day of 6th grade. I went home and I told my mom, I am never, ever going back to school. I hate it. I hated every single thing about it. Walking around with those holes in my clothes, carrying that bologna sandwich, I hate it. I am never, ever going back. Funny thing happened when the summer ended. I found myself lined up with my other brothers and sisters, headed off to school, just like a little duck. You see, going home and telling Oline Hearne that you were not going to school was like taking water and pouring it down a duck's back. It flat out meant nothing to her. You see, you don't raise 8 kids in poverty and let them come home and tell you what they're not going to do. Seventh grade, first day of 7th grade was just like any other day to me. I hated it. Absolutely hated it. Until I walked into Mr. Hake's 5th period science class. I'm standing in the doorway of Mr. Hake's 5th period science class looking for my favorite seat in the corner in the back in the dark. Mr. Hake is at his desk. He's got his head down. He's looking at some papers. He doesn't see me yet. Mr. Hake, 5'10", 5'11", medium built, dark brown hair, the deep blue eyes, the most compassionate man I'd ever met in my life. He finally looks up and he says, "Oh, you must be Nathan." He said, "I've heard a lot of wonderful things about you." And I do this. It had to be another Nathan back there. Because I knew at that elementary, I stayed in the principal's office. I knew he would said wonderful things about me. And he gets up and he comes over and he shakes my hand, he puts his arm around me, and he walks me into the classroom. And as he's walking, he's talking to him, and he stops and he says, "Nathan, we have arranged seating in this class, and this is your desk." And he pointed to a desk that was directly in front of his desk on the front row. And fear. Because you can tell, I'm not that front desk guy. I'm not going to raise my hand to ask any questions. I like the back. That's why I got there early, so I can sit in the back. But in no time at all, he would alleviate every single fear that I ever had, because he was a master teacher. He was a master mentor, a master motivator. And he could take a room like this and make every single one of you in here feel like you had a private tutor. And when I left his classroom, I did feel special. The last class of the day for me was 7th grade football. And I'm lined up outside waiting for the coaches to come out with all the other 7th graders. And out walks this big giant of a man, Coach Mark Wallace. He's got light brown hair. He's got light blue eyes. And he goes down the line shaking hands. And when he gets to me, I see this hair is all over his body. And he says, "You Hearne?" "Yes, sir. I hear you're a good athlete. And you're going to be on my team. And you know something, Hearne? We're going to have a lot of fun winning football games." I went home the first day of school walking on a cloud. You see, I had been affirmed in one day by 2 people, something that never happened to me before. I could not wait to get back to school the next day. Coach Wallace was a man of his word. He did put me on his team, and every single day he had one of those life-impacting messages for me. Every single day. I was his starting running back, his starting cornerback. I never came off the field. When people treat you like that, what do you, better question, when you're treated like that, what are you not going to do? You're not going to let them down. You're not going to let them down. And I remember playing a game for him, the 6th game of the season at 12, and I scored 4 touchdowns, rushed for like 300 yards, intercepted a pass on defense, and I absolutely felt invincible that day. And after the game, I'm standing in my uniform, and he comes up, and he does this. He hugs me. And he looks down at me, and he says, "Hearne, that was just outstanding." And he had this favorite phrase that he used to use with me all the time, and he would say, he said to me in that moment, "But I knew you would do this." He steps back. His wife is with him. They're a young couple, and they're together. She steps up. She hugs me, and she tells me I'm wonderful. She's beautiful. And no one looked like that at that school she was a teacher had ever hugged me and told me that I was wonderful. It was a great day. That was on a Saturday. On Monday, I'm sitting in Mr. Hake's 5th period science class. And he walks by my desk, and he puts my report card face down on my desk. I pick that report card up, and I have an A in science. The very first A that I could remember getting in public school. He continues on around, and then he comes back, and he stands directly in front of my desk, and he says, "Nathan, stand up." And he says, "Boys and girls, I need your attention." He said, "I want to tell you about Nathan." And he tells them all about the game that I played on that Saturday. I never, ever saw him there. That's the kind of mentor he was. And he says, Nathan is not only an outstanding football player, but he's an A student in this class. And for his outstanding efforts, I'm going to make him my lab assistant. And he said, Nathan, don't move. Stay right there. And he goes to the back of the room. And he goes into the lab area, and he goes into a closet. And I'm standing there in front of my peers with this deer in the headlight looks because I don't have a clue what a lab assistant is. He comes back with this white bundle. He unfolds it. Turns out to be a brand spanking new white lab coat, just like the one he wears. He puts that lab coat on me in front of my peers, and I look down, and he's read my name on the pocket. Gentlemen, standing in that classroom in that moment with that white lab coat on, did this. It transformed my life. I would never, ever be that kid who walked into a classroom looking for the seat in the corner, in the back, in the dark. They just they saved my life. Every single day, Mr. Hake in that classroom would tell me, Hearne, those grades that you made in elementary school are not an indication of your intelligence. Every day, Coach Wallace out there on that field gave me those life-impacting messages. And I remember one he used to say to me quite frequently, Hearne, those clothes that you're walking in with the holes in them and those shoes with the holes in them and carrying those bologna sandwiches are not an indication of the man that you're going to be. Has no bearing on your life. I went from being this kid who made C's, D's, and F's on his report cards to now making A's and B's, and not just in Mr. Hake's class, but in all my classes because I didn't want to what? Didn't want to let him down. I went from being this kid who had a strong desire, I was going to drop out of school. I was bound and determined to drop out of school. If my mother was alive and she walked in this room or walked in this hall, she would say, I had to beat that boy every single day to get him to go to school. I went from being that kid to now having a dream, a goal, and a desire to be a science teacher and a football coach. You know, walking around in that white lab coat had its fringe benefits, too. I became a chick magnet. Don't let them down. And I didn't. Kept my grades up. In junior high, went to high school, made the honor roll. Graduated from high school, received an academic athletic scholarship to college. Graduated from college, came back to that area, taught science and coached football for 25 years. 10 of those years was spent at Permian High School. I don't have to tell you. National champions, 6 state championships, team of the decade, a book, a movie, and an Emmy Award TV series came out of that time I served at Permian High School. But that wasn't the reason that I went into coaching and teaching. I went into coaching and teaching to walk out those two men's legacy. I went into coaching and teaching to live that legacy. I wanted every day in my biology classes to pass out that white lab coat experience that Mr. Hake had given me. Every student, I wanted to give them that white lab coat experience. Every football player that I coached, I wanted to hug them and look at them and say, son, that was awesome. I knew you could do this, that Coach Wallace had given me. That's the reason I coach and teach, to walk out that legacy. In '94, I went from being a coach at that school to being a principal. My second year of being a principal, they named me the outstanding principal of Region 18, which covered 23 different counties, and they sent me to Austin, Texas to accept the award from the governor of Texas. I come back, and they got an article in the paper, about this big, a small article in the paper of me receiving this award. 2 days later, Mrs. Alice Mosley, my secretary, walks into my office and she says, Mr. Hearne, you have a visitor. I'm shuffling papers and I don't look up and I said, Miss Mosley, just send them in. And a few seconds later, I feel his presence over me. And I look up. It's Coach Wallace. But he's not Coach Wallace anymore. He's the superintendent of that school that I graduated from. And I stand up to shake his hand. And he does this. And he says, Hearne, just wanted to come by and tell you how proud we are of you. And then he says it. But I knew you would do this. And I'm 44 years old. Standing there in his arms, I felt just like that 7th grade football player all over again. And I began to weep. I cried like a little baby. I mean, it was the most embarrassing thing that had ever happened to me in my whole entire life. I wept like a little, I bet I cried for 30 minutes. In his arms. But you know now, it doesn't embarrass me. The older I get, the more I cry. You know, when my wife and I, we go to the movies, that's our favorite pastime. When they get to those tearjerker scenes, she'll open up her purse, whip out a box of Kleenex and say, here, baby. Him coming by to see me just affirmed my desire to walk out that legacy. It was just an affirmation. You know, Stephen Covey, in his book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, he leaves a great example of the importance of living and leaving a positive legacy. And he says, picture yourself driving up in the parking lot, going to a friend's funeral. You park up, you pull up, you park, you get out, and you walk into the chapel and you can smell all the beautiful roses. You hear the soft organ music playing in the background. And as you walk down the aisle, you walk straight up to the casket and you look in and you come face to face with yourself. This is your funeral. 3 years from now. You turn around and you notice that everyone is in there to show you how much they love you and their appreciation for what you've done in your life. Now, there's going to be 4 people who are going to speak about your life during that time. There's that immediate family member, a dear friend who knows you well, a colleague from work, and a member of your church. This is the question. What would you like for them to say about you? How would you like to be remembered? What character trait would you like to them say that you embodied? What accomplishment would you like for them to say that you had achieved in that life? And then I want you to reach up and I want you to push pause. And I want you to take a slow, long look at every single face in that chapel. And I want you to ask yourself this question. What difference would I like to have made in their lives? What difference would I like to have made in their lives? You think about that for a moment. Covey says, if it changes, when you think about that, if it changes, why not live like that today? You know why? Tomorrow tomorrow is not promised to anybody in this room. Why not live like that today? Gooch. That man that I know who searched for that coach is me. That's Coach Wallace. And gentlemen, I spend every single day of my life walking out his legacy. 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 10 says, every good and special gift that you have received from God, and I'm looking in the eyes of men who have a good and special gift that they have received from God, that gift should be used in service to others. Gentlemen, I can't express the honor of having this opportunity to talk to you. Thank you, and God bless each and every one of you.
Thanks for your support of Wingmen Ministries. We would love to hear your comments about today's show and help you get connected with other men in your local area. To keep up to date on upcoming events, element groups, and speakers, please visit our website at wingmen.org. And while you're there, be sure to sign up for our email list.